let's see who's here. Wayne.
Is Eleazar unwell?
No, he had, I don't like to disclose people's business. I know he's like going through something personal and had a meeting and can't make it.
I'm not looking to pry into his personal.
No. I'm just saying I don't.
Curious because he hasn't actually run the last several executive committee meetings, and he doesn't go to the borough board meetings, and he's missed a couple of general meetings. So I'm wondering, does he actually have time for this?
Great, valid question and observation that I don't know. I myself.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying I'm gonna try to do the best that I can. I myself have personal like things that I needed to attend to tonight and did not plan on facilitating this meeting. So I will ask for grace of folks if I'm not 100% on my game and do the best that I can. If he does hop on, I will definitely hop off the call, and yeah, that's where we are. So Angel's not here yet.
Anything I can do to help, let me know.
Yeah, right now I know. So right now we have Steve. That's the only. Is Steve the only one that we know that's not coming tonight?
That I know of, yes. So you have quorum already, though.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's get started. The time is 6:34, and I will call this meeting to order. If y'all give me a minute to pull up my agenda. All right, cool. So calling the meeting to order. I'm gonna let Ebenezer get started while I kind of compile some stuff, and then I'll have Jim kind of join me in on actually, it's fine. Let's just do it this way. So board chair report. I don't have a full report. I did talk to Ellie this morning and to Jim. I was actually out the country until yesterday for the last 2 weeks. And so the biggest thing, of course, is our transition to hybrid and voting on it. And let's see, so the resolution I saw that was sent out officially, I think today. I'll let Jim is Jim even on? Yes, Jim is on. Jim talk a little bit about it. There is a decision that we as a collective will have to make in terms of the public hearing. Everybody should have received the okay, I saw Liz's read. So okay, backtrack. Where we were 3 weeks ago, last month, was that we have been instructed, like all community boards, to host a public hearing this month in regards to to our running, or if we choose to, right? So whether we were going to go hybrid or we were going to stay traditional in person. And so we, like everybody, had to have a public hearing in the month of June. After that public hearing, the entire community board will vote on whether we go hybrid or stick to in person. That reso was produced. Like I said, I was out for 2 weeks. And so obviously none of us have been invited to a public hearing. And so that public hearing, we need to put the date on it for now. I think in the week of June 7th was when we also received notice again that the governor's order had been extended to July. So that also kind of gave us extra wiggle room of saying, okay, we didn't need to rush the process all by June, I think 9th. Or June 15th, yeah, June 9th was when it was originally there because the ordinance had been extended. So that's the context. Everyone should have it. I can share it on the screen, Jim, if you want to do a quick walkthrough. of what it is, but obviously this is going to be formally discussed at a public hearing and of course at the general meeting with everyone.
Okay, let me give everyone a little bit of background. And as Catherine mentioned, fortunately, the deadline for when we have to have in-person meetings is now moved, I think, to July 14th, because the governor extended her emergency declaration. Now, the current, there's a new version of one section of the open meetings law, and that section enables what it calls hybrid meetings. But it's very strict on what these meetings are like. And in fact, I think we discussed this last month. And in fact, I think last month, I think most of us were privy to a letter that Adele Bartlett sent out. And what that letter did basically is it told you exactly, or told community boards exactly what the resolution enabling hybrid meetings had to say, okay? And what I did all by myself, well, I actually had some help, but is I wrote such a resolution, and everybody got it today about a couple hours ago. And we can put it on the screen and look at it in a bit. Okay, now most of the stuff in that resolution are actually words that are required to be there by the open meetings law itself. So for example, when a person attends, when a member of the board attends the meeting remotely, then it has to be listed in the minutes. And that actually is from the law itself. So now, just to add a little bit more prelude or whatever, we only need to have this resolution if we want to hold remote meetings, or hybrid meetings as they're called. But we do want to do that. And even if we have this resolution, all it does is enable the board and its committees to have hybrid resolutions. It doesn't really require that it does. But all these words have to be approved by the board, and only then can we have hybrid meetings. Okay? So so let's just look at what's there. The whereas is basically set up, as we all well know, why we are passing this resolution. Now we can add to whereases if we want. We just have to have some reasonable basis. The real key are the rules and instructions for hybrid meetings. So let's look at rule number 1. And why don't you want me to read it, or we'll just look at it? So what this basically said.
I was gonna say we don't have to
Sorry.
read it because I think this is also gonna take time for folks to digest. But I think if you can let me know the numbers of which ones are like the boilerplate.
Well, I think we want to go through all of it. And
Okay.
again, some of it is very simple. So you want me to read it? That might make it simpler.
No, we can see it on screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all done looking at number 1?
I have a question about number 1.
Okay.
So I would suggest instead of without a live quorum being present, I would say without an in-person quorum being present, or a quorum. I would say in person rather than live, but what's not clear to me is this seems to suggest if we had 2 separate physical locations where people were, and they were somehow connected to each other virtually, does that, if there are 2 people in one location and 6 people in another, does that count as all 8 of them being present in person?
Exactly, except both of those places have to be, the public has to be able to be in both of those places where all of the people are.
I see. So we couldn't like call my living room a place
Unless
I was
you
inviting
invited the
people
public into your
and
living room.
I see.
Right,
Okay.
right.
then I think just clarifying and adding some clarifying language, something along the lines of irrespective of the number of I just think it should be made clear because that's implicit, but it's not actually clear.
Okay, well,
So-
wait, Catherine, don't go crazy. We
No,
cannot
I'm
change
just
it
adding
because-
comments on the sides
Oh,
and this is
that
not
you
the
can do.
official one. Yeah.
The thing is, all these things now that we sent it out have to be done as amendments at the public hearing.
Yes.
Correct.
You know, and again, this is a good time to start, you know, and I hopefully you will find that what I produced is pretty good. Now let's all look at number 2. And if no one else has any questions about number 1.
No, I
or
don't see
comment.
any hands. I can zoom in also.
For number 2, Jim, I would like to recommend to spell out the OML and perhaps
It does spell out the OML. That's why that stuff is in quotes.
but on the second line, I don't
Yes,
see it.
you notice this stuff in quotes, disability, illness, blah, blah, blah. That is the OML.
No, I think he's referring to the actual abbreviation
Open meeting law.
OML, but Isidro, it is spelled out in the first whereas. It says whereas.
Yeah, and again,
the
Catherine, you
Open
may,
Meetings
you
Law, paren
don't change
OML.
it. We can't change it. We can make, right. This went out, so there it is. But again, I followed the standard procedure. The first time I talk about the open meetings law, I put your right OML. And if you scroll up, you'll see it explains what OML is. But we could be more specific, but you know.
But Jim,
So-
if we cannot add or make any comments or add to it.
No, you can make all the comments you want, but we cannot change it tonight. All your comments, number 1, Catherine is going to make notes of the comments. And all these changes that we would like have to be done at the public hearing.
Okay, so I would still like to have that completely spelled out. And
Each time,
It is completely spelled out
it
at
is
the
completely
beginning.
spelled out.
not on the
Yeah, it
second
is.
line.
Okay.
Not on the second line.
Okay, I got it, Isidro. So even in the second, there's multiple OMLs. We can either choose to spell out open meeting law and instead of using acronyms throughout.
Very well.
Well, I
Um,
wouldn't write the whole thing all the time, but if Cedro feels that would be an improvement, I have no problem with that.
And also, perhaps we can add factors, or maybe that's just my idea. Unexpected factors on the third line,
Scroll up a little bit.
It's right here. Hold on.
right? Unexpected factors with an S, maybe. No.
Well, no, again, you have to have real reasons, okay? You can't, you know, and
He's saying plural as opposed to singular.
No, that's not, it's grammatically correct for it to be singular.
So
I'm simply saying that's what he's saying. He wasn't saying it shouldn't be a real factor. He's simply saying factor should be factors. And you're saying actually factor is correct grammatically.
Correct.
right. And furthermore, those are the actual words of the open meetings law because they're in quotes, okay? Now,
Hold on, Isidro, do you have anything else before you keep going, Jim? Okay.
I'm good. Thank you, ma'am.
Well,
and again, I understand, you know, that we want to make this the best document it can be because we want it to make sense to everybody. Okay, could you scroll up a little bit, Catherine? Now, what I then say in the next paragraph is all of the pretty much all of the excused absences we already have for people not attending meetings are also perfectly reasonable reasons to attend a meeting remotely. So if you're sick and well enough to attend, you don't have to have an excused absence. You can actually participate remotely if you're well enough to do it. And you know, if you you know, if you look at the quote from the open meetings law, a lot of, you know, caregiving comes up. And if you have to stay home, fine. But now you'll have the opportunity, you know, you will either have an excused absence or if you want, you'll be able to participate. Now, the only thing I added was this next paragraph, which is not in the open meetings law, but it was something that came up last month when we discussed it. And I remember Mary was rather adamant about it, and so was I. And that is, if you're seriously concerned of contracting something at the meeting, like COVID or whatever in the future, you have every right to, stay home and attend the meeting, remotely. So I added that. And now the other thing I want to mention to you is I had a long talk, which I occasionally do with Adele Bartlett. So, and we bounce things off of each other. And the thing is, and you'll see that's in this document also, if too many people decide to stay home for perfectly valid reasons and be remote, or, you can't have a meeting because you don't have a real quorum. So that's the whole thing. So, but I point that out later. Okay, now if you look at any questions yet or comments?
We don't have any hands, but I did want to highlight that piece in this context of the executive committee in particular, because I know that we have committees that are smaller that have had issues with quorum in the past. So there
This is not going to help, unless you have enough bodies there.
Right. So, but yeah, and I know you're going to get into the specifics next, but this is something that I will encourage, any chair, and particularly anybody who's, an assistant chair, to really think about, what's the communication like with your existing committee members? How much in advance are they letting you know if they're going to be late or absent? Because this is or how in advance you plan any major items requiring voting in person. So that's going to take some like specific planning in advance. So that's just something to know.
Okay, now we're getting to the boilerplate. Number 3 is exactly that's a dictate of the new version of the open meetings law. Why people are being virtual has to be recorded in the minutes. And the other thing, as was mentioned earlier, but I reiterate in number 4, is the fact that although members can participate remotely or virtually, whatever you want to call it, they're not part of the actual quorum. And again, if we don't have enough people present, and as Liz figured out, and in fact, if you look at the law, it's even less obscure than what I wrote. You actually can have a bunch of people here and a bunch of people there, provided the 2 places are public, and that actually works. So it actually helps. Now, I notice in number 5, there's a missing comma after the word heard that we'll have to put in.
Jim, a question for you went to number 5 too fast. So you say members can fully participate in vote, but they cannot be part of quorum.
Right. That means unless you have enough people present to hold a meeting in the meeting room, you can't hold a meeting.
So you have to have quorum in person.
Yes, but these additional people are still members of the board, and they can discuss things and they can vote on things, but they're not counted as, part of the quorum. And now the other thing is this heard, seen, and identified. The people who crafted this, we're not, you don't have to bring the thing, the camera wherever you go. And basically, the best way of understanding this business about the heard, seen, and identified is they're trying to make the virtual attendees' actual attendance as obvious as people at a general meeting. Let me give you an example. If you're at a general meeting and so-and-so gets up and goes to the bathroom, everybody knows, if they choose to look, that they're not there for that part of the thing, and then they come back, okay? Or, 2 people go out to talk to one another. So basically, this creates the same situation for the people who are attending virtually, because everyone will know that they've stepped away. And so you can step away, it's all being reasonable. And if necessary, probably you could even turn off your camera, because again, people will know that you're not, actually there at that moment. And The other thing is obviously, it sounds like you have to leave your microphone on all the time, but if something with sirens is going on, So this is all very reasonable. That's what number 5 is. Could you scroll up a bit?
Liz has her hand up before we go to the next part.
Any comments or questions?
Yes.
Certainly.
So I'm just really perplexed on how this is going to affect voting. So we have 50 members and we have to have an in-person quorum in order for a meeting to continue. And the rest of the people are welcome to show up virtually. So suppose we have, I don't know, 27 members show up in person, that's a quorum.
Mhm.
We would need at least
Mhm.
26. And then we have, 15 people online. So, and then we vote on something. The
Right.
quorum is 27 people. And so anything in order for it to pass would need 14 votes, which is.
No, except, no. You see,
Hold-
that's,
Hold on a second.
yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
if I'm understanding this correctly, people who are attending virtually, they count not towards a quorum, but they do count towards the overall attendance for the purposes of calculating what is a majority of a vote. So if you have 27 people in person and 13 people virtual, does that mean for the purposes of counting the votes, there are 40 people potentially voting, and in order for something to pass, it needs 21 votes, which is half plus one of the people in person and the people virtually, or you just need half plus one of the quorum?
Actually, and I apologize for interrupting you because you actually interpreted it absolutely correctly. Now, the quorum are the people, and if we make a slight distinction, which has already come up, by the way, you'll see that it all makes sense. The quorum are the people you need to have a meeting, but now the other number, which is significant, is the number of people voting. And if
Okay.
you
So
remember
then I think that
from,
should just be spelled out very clearly in the reso. There should be something that says, for the purposes of voting, the attendance includes both the quorum of people attending in person and the people attending virtually. So I just think it should be spelled out so that it's really explicit.
we could certainly do that. It basically, as you figured out, is implied, and you're
Sure.
absolutely correct. The number of people voting, and remember, if you are present while a vote is occurring, based upon the rules that we learned, when we had that confusion with an election recently.
Yeah.
If you're present when the vote is going on and you don't say anything one way or another, you didn't vote in favor of it, and therefore your vote will not count in favor of it, and you might be part of the majority that's not in favor of it. So but again, so if you as a little task, might want to come up with the exact words we want to do to clarify this, but in fact, your interpretation is absolutely correct.
Will do.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go, I wanted to take about 10, till 7.
We're
10 on
almost
this.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here we go. Let me zoom out a little bit.
Okay, now number 6, we done with number 5, right?
Yes.
Okay, number 6 is straight from the public meetings law. It says what it says. That people attend, and this is about the public. If you attend virtually, you have to be able to speak during the public session. Notice it says that, and that's in the law, I believe, or in the directions from Medell. Just like people who are actually there. So we can't discriminate against people who are not there in person, members of the public. Now, number 7, again, is just copied straight out of the open meetings law. So there it is. We have to use technology that's consistent with the ADA so that disabled people can attend the meeting to the full extent that they can. Number 8, again, is straight out of the open meetings law. It just talks about, the notice pretty much. And we just have to follow that rule. And finally, the last one is also straight out of the open meetings law. The open meetings law, either now or always, has set a time limit for getting minutes out. And there it is. And it has to be in the resolution. And there it is. So that's what I put together. And, and so
We
are
have,
there any other questions or whatever?
there's Sally and then, excuse me, Liz.
Yeah, I
Sure.
had a question about posting of information before the general meeting in terms of minutes and that kind of stuff. I mean, in the past, when we were in person, that was always on the table, so people had access to resolutions, to minutes, et cetera. Since we've gone virtual, they've not had access to that information. So I'm wondering how we're going to handle that requirement.
Well, that's actually, and then again, the details are something the board has to, we can just put it on the website. That's what number 8 is all about.
Yeah, I
Because
understand that. We haven't
right.
complied.
Well, but again, that's not going to be in these rules. How the office implements this is another story, and it has to be implemented because that's what the rules say and that's what the law says. And probably what we will do is get all these documents on our website prior to the meeting so the public will get the same advanced view of these documents as everyone else. But that basically doesn't change the rule, but you have a very good point. We have to obviously have a mechanism to do this.
I
You are
just wonder if
correct.
we have the mechanism, so we're not.
Oh, you're absolutely correct. And now Ebenezer has marching orders, if you want to put it that way. We
Yeah,
have to
I
create
mean,
such a mechanism.
I did want to say, on our webs, I think there's, the difference of the general and the committee meetings. I think what's going to be a little bit of a challenge, if you will, for all of us on the committees side is that, sometimes, let's say if there's a resol that y'all are working on or a presentation that's going to take place, you usually just share the screen. Now, what it means is that when we post the calendar and post the agenda, we need to also post all the accompanying or like key accompanying materials. Let's say if that's a resol. So that's really important to make sure that we get that in on time. I know right now that the last I heard that there were changes being made to the website, and pretty much I think all of the minutes going back years are on there. But we do need to make sure that we get minutes in on time to make it on the website. And then also I think and this is a practice, doesn't, again, to Jim's point, huge difference. This isn't the how, this is about the ability to do it. But normally in person, we also had the packets. We were trying to also not waste paper. For 2 years, we haven't wasted paper. So we could make the decision of not having those packets anymore and just making sure we stick to electronic materials too.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about with that is that people that don't have access to technology, but I just want to make sure that rather than just being slotted somewhere on the website so that someone has to spend hours trying to find the different resolutions, that they're actually attached to the agenda.
Okay.
So that it will be easy for participants.
I don't know.
Well, we could do our best to make it easier. And the other thing is there may be documents that only become available at the night of a committee meeting. Obviously, you cannot make those available in advance. So that's not that shouldn't be a problem either.
Yeah. So
That's my major concern with all of this.
no, it's valid.
And I think Liz wanted to add something.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I understand that this is the thing that was sent out, and so we can only make changes at the hearing. But I think for things like typos, where there's a missing comma, where you use the word meanings instead of meetings, I think we look better if we send things out that don't have typos in them. So I feel like something that's just a straight up typo, I don't think it's unreasonable to make that change and to just note when it's presented publicly that there were a couple of typos that were corrected. I do
not have any problem with that. That's perfectly
Excellent.
Okay. So with that said, hold on, Liz, could we just, Ebenezer, when we post it on the website with the public hearing, Jim, can you resend it without the typos and also a heading? Because we don't have a heading on it.
Yeah,
And so that way folks know.
I'll call you, Jim, or I'll send you a quick email with.
Well, no, in fact, I will deputize you to do all the typos and make a heading.
That sounds good. Thank you. I do have a
Okay.
question. In the last section where it says minutes of meetings, where there was a virtual participation, yada, yada, section 106 of the POL, is that supposed to be OML?
No, it's the public officers law.
Okay, so that should definitely be spelled out because that's the first time that's used.
Correct. And again, that was, again, well, the other thing
That's
I
fine.
can make available, you got it?
Yeah, I got it. Public officers law.
Right.
I would also respectfully request that item 6 that says the public attending virtually is required to be able to participate be changed to.
Yeah, that's clumsy.
Yeah, I would suggest members of the public attending virtually must be able to participate. And I think that's a grammatical correction that makes it easier to read.
Right, and must probably has the same strength as is required, so we can
Correct.
probably get away.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
the legalese would be shall, but that's pretentious.
right. No,
Okay, so-
I think, and you concur. We try to make what we write as, transparent as possible.
Okay.
Okay, so
Insofar
Liz,
far as it's transparent at all.
so Liz and, sorry,
Can
so
I-
Liz and James.
Can I raise one more
Yeah,
question?
yeah, Sally has a thing. I'm just to clarify for recording
Yeah.
for the office. Liz, Jim will
there've been-
connect and resend to the office staff so that when they post it on the website, we have it clean. Go, Sally.
There've been a number of complaints about how we set up our Zoom in terms of what the public can see, in terms of who's attending, who the participants are, which is different than when it's in person. Are we going to change our Zoom settings so that there will be more information visible to the public?
I don't, to begin with, that's not relevant to this discussion. That's number one. And number two, there's stuff that should not be visible to the public. We're members of the board, so we get to see all the participants and whatever, and get to see their names and stuff. Now, we could have a discussion at some point in the future to make some of the stuff available. And then the other piece, which we have to discuss with our IT committee, is, Zoom is as it is in some ways, and some things cannot be tailored. So, but I think it's a good suggestion insofar as we could make as much available to the public as possible. But,
Because
when you're in the public,
In
at a
person,
meeting,
they
you
can
just look
see
around.
who's there. I get all sorts of complaints that our meetings aren't really open because they can't really see anything. So, and I have to say, at meetings when I'm part of the public, I get equally frustrated.
Well, again, under the new version of the open meetings law, they're going to get to see more pictures. 'Cause,
Okay.
most of the time you're supposed.
Okay, Liz has her hand up, and then I want to just go into the next step of the decision making we need to do.
Fine.
Go ahead.
Thank you. To Sally's point, it is true that it's appropriate for there to be a difference in the settings of what panelists can see and what participants can see. But it seems to me that if you're attending a public meeting in person, you walk into the room and you can see who is there. So I don't think it's a violation of privacy for a person who's attending a meeting virtually as a member of the public to be able to see who else is attending. It's not a secret that, your neighbor down the street is in the room with you if you are in an actual room. So when you're in a Zoom, you ought to be able to see that. Maybe you don't have to be able to shout out, but you ought to be able to see who else is in the room. And I think that while Zoom has many advantages, that very weird thing of not knowing who else is there when you are a member of the public attending it lacks transparency for reasons that are not entirely within the board's control. So if there's some way to let people know who else is on the Zoom, that feels like it more closely embodies, pun very much intended, the experience that one would have if they were in a room with other people.
That's a very good point. But again, not relevant to this discussion, but it's something that we can certainly consider. Because and just to further, further what Liz is saying, it's precisely what she's talking about. Let's say, Fred, your arch enemy, is there. Maybe you might be slightly more circumspect in what you say about Fred. It actually is, and if you were at a real meeting, you would know that Fred was there because you would see Fred. So I think, Sally's point is very well taken.
Okay, I'm gonna have Wayne, he hasn't said anything, and then we
Yeah.
gotta move on.
Yeah, I would like us to move on. I think just to this point, I think it's a matter of the setup or the settings of the Zoom, and people who understand that far better than I can look at it, and we don't have to beat it to death at the Z. But I've been in Zoom meetings where you can see attendees. They can't, shout out. As you said, in many cases, you want to control that because instead of having one meeting, you end up with 12 meetings. But there is a way, just like in Teams, where you can see everyone who's in the meeting.
Right, yeah. So that's a project for the summer for sure. Okay, so the next part of this is that, so on Tuesday, we have our general meeting where this has to get voted on. We have to do a public hearing beforehand.
Say
Sorry,
that
did I mess
again.
up? That our general meeting is next Tuesday.
Yeah, I get that, but today's Tuesday, so we're gonna have a public hearing before then.
Exactly, Wayne. We have to.
Yeah.
I know it is SMH and I feel you in many ways.
No, we are not providing sufficient notice.
No, it's-
Right. So what it is, what it is, yes. So it's Tuesday in a week. And so for us to have a public hearing, in order to give people sufficient time, meaning that it goes on the website, it gets e-blasted this entire week, is that we either do it on Monday or we do it Tuesday before the meeting with a time constraint and then have the general meeting. And I agree, and we can beat it to death. I was really clear about we need to give all board members and people at minimum a week to whether they want to also email any questions that they have or anything else. But as of right now, it has to be, we need to have the hearing before the vote. So it's either a Monday or Tuesday. Liz.
So we're violating our own bylaws because public hearings are required to have 10 days notice. So given that we can't do that, I would suggest that we have the public hearing as late as possible, which would be Tuesday. And we do the public hearing at, 6 or 6:30 on Tuesday. And we start our meeting, our formal meeting at, an hour later. And we do it that way.
I just want to clarify, and I think Jim, maybe this is more you. Sorry, the 10-day notice is for the ULURP stuff and everything else. I think in our bylaws, what we have is for other general public hearings are 3 or 5 days, one of the two.
Okay.
I think that's the standard we've used. And the other thing is,
So we're good in terms of bylaws. It's really about being fair to people.
The key again, and Liz will agree, everyone will agree, it's good faith. We're not playing around. So that's part of our armamentarium.
But more notice is better than less notice. And I think we're also likely to have better participation if we don't require people to show up to things 2 nights in a row. I just don't see people coming. So if the goal is to really ensure robust public participation, it will make for a longer evening, but it will make for less time in total. And I think better participation if we have the thing on Tuesday, and maybe we start a little bit earlier, maybe not, I don't know.
Okay. All right, so Liz is the only
And
one who
again,
said-
most of it, as I alerted you to, is just boilerplate. We really can't change anyway. And by the time, and we have the amendments, the minus substantive amendments that we worked on tonight. So ideally the public hearing, And the way I would advertise it, and I agree with Liz, that they should be both on the same night. The general meeting will start immediately after the public hearing, sometime after 7 p.m. So that way, if the public hearing ends early, we can immediately go to the general meeting, to twiddle our thumbs.
So is there anyone else who is absolutely, we can work this based off of consensus, who is not for Tuesday, who would prefer Monday?
And all this, of course, fortunately, can be virtual.
Yes.
I think it makes perfect sense since the general meeting is on Tuesday and people know if we did the public hearing from 6:30 to 7:30, because nothing happens in half hour around here. And then you have the general meeting starting an hour later, people who are going to show up for the general meeting, you're not asking them, as Liz said, to show up for another meeting the day before as well.
Okay.
So it's almost like taking public session and moving it to the beginning of the agenda. You're making the public hearing the first thing for the first hour. Needs to be, tightly controlled with not a lot of, a narrative explaining why we're doing it. It's like, this is it. And then move into the general meeting.
Okay, well, asterisk the 7:30. I'm gonna go with Liz. You've proposed 6:30, same startup time, followed by Domingo.
Yeah, just a quick question, Jim, this is a resolution in terms of the heading, there's a resolution from the executive committee, correct? Or is it?
Good, yeah.
Okay.
Very good point.
And do we have to vote on this resolution as an executive committee? Or are we just sort of putting it out there that we haven't voted on it?
Actually, why don't we vote on it as putting it out there as an executive committee? And that would be good. And the other thing is, hopefully, and I understand where Wayne is coming from, maybe by some miracle, since this is close to a motherhood resolution, I think we can get done with it in half an hour. And if we can, then we'll have more time for the general meeting, or it won't go on so long.
All right,
So why don't we have a vote on this?
Hold on, before that, I'm gonna
Sure.
have Domingo speak, and then I actually have a point on voting on it, and then Wayne.
Yeah, my thing is, these meetings usually go pretty long. Is it possible for all of us to have like some sort of mutual understanding where it's like everybody's gonna refer to, because it's gonna be a pretty long meeting if we're gonna do a public session on top of a general meeting.
Okay, if I could comment on that. The real problem with the public meetings is the generous nature of our chair, Eli, who allows the elected officials to go on and on and on. This is an emergency situation, and he can literally say, or whoever's running the meeting, now we're required to have the public session, so that we can't do anything with that. But certainly the elected officials and their representatives, because of the extenuating circumstances, can stick to 2 minutes this time, and we'll just be serious about it. We don't, so that's my.
Or could we just have them go after we do the voting for the for the licensing committee, and then so like that we at least knock out the business and then go into whatever.
The only problem is then they get on their high horse. I am an elected official and I am here now. And, I think the simplest thing is just say we're in a tough spot and we apologize. We are giving you 2 minutes. Next month we will give you 3 minutes, because they talk much too long anyway.
There's no next month. There's no next month. It's June. But I think let's email folks suggestions within exec committee on how we can improve our timing, because I agree with Domingo. This is a month that we have it's June. And so especially public session tends to be full in June, and a lot of the licensing stuff too. What I wanted to say, I don't think we should actually vote tonight because we haven't had the public hearing. And so I think in them, I don't know. I just feel like in terms of just the faith of having a public hearing before a vote is important. So,
we could just offer this as a draft on behalf of, because we as Catherine pointed out, we really want to hear the public, and we really want to hear from the other board members to make sure that this is exactly what we want to do. And I think it's not going to get us in any trouble. So.
Okay, Wayne, and then
Yeah,
Liz.
so I basically was gonna say the same thing, and I don't want to beat it to it, because I know last time we discussed this, some, board members were, kind of concerned that the executive committee would, vote on something and not have sufficient input even from other board members. So if we propose it as a draft in response to what we are required to do pursuant to the open meetings law, and that is the purpose of the public hearing, to get comments, then it feels a little, more open than saying, we got this draft like 2.5 hours ago and we voted on it. So, I mean, we reviewed it and we are now setting it forth for, the full board and the community to review and comment.
Mhm. All right,
Sounds
Liz,
good.
and then we'll lock down the meeting. Go ahead, Liz.
Thanks. Okay, everybody write down the date and time. I am agreeing 100% with Domingo. I feel like if there is a gently worded communication that goes out to all of the elected officials and their representatives that says, we love your input, but we have to have this public hearing at the beginning of our meeting. And in order to make room for the public to participate in a robust and material way, we would like to defer all of the elected official reports to the end of the meeting. I will be shocked if any elected official or representative says, oh, no, what I have to say is more important than the public. That's just not going to happen. And I don't know that we could necessarily do that every month, as nice as that would be. But I think that if we give them the heads up in advance, I can't imagine they're not gonna be okay with that.
Mhm. Yeah, okay, so we're gonna take the suggestion for that, and then any other thoughts of especially once we have a better idea of what's coming out from each committee, on how we can improve it, please send. I would say then my ask would be that when we put together, I mean, we have to have a separate public hearing notice, but I think that the email that we send inviting to the general meeting, that we make folks aware. So like explicitly put 6:30 to 7:30 with an asterisk public hearing, 7:30 asterisk to whatever, 10 o'clock general meeting, because there might be people who only come in for the general meeting, or vice versa. So as I'm cool if the meeting agenda has that and people are aware when they tune in. And we just got to keep it tight all across, so that we're not going through midnight. So, all right. So it looks like we got
gotta
that
go
locked
out. It's got to go out tomorrow. That's number one.
tomorrow.
And the other thing is, I just want to reiterate what I said. You may not want to say when the general meeting starts, because if you say it starts at 7:30, you really can't start it earlier. If you say it starts immediately after the public hearing ends, likely no sooner than 7 o'clock. See what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. So Ebenezer, I would say if you could send to the executive team the drafted agenda before it goes out, so that way we can make sure it has like any required language or it's clear to folks. At the time, 7:20. So I want to just thank everybody right now for this part. Thank you, Jim, for putting this together. It could have been a 5-page resolution and you got it really neat to the bare bones. And this also gives, I think, everyone a really great opportunity over the summer, as we understand with all the new members that we got, who's coming onto our committee, a better planning, and thinking when in the fall, if things go to plan, we start 100% in person. Sorry, hybrid, excuse me, if it passes. All right, so I'm gonna pass it to Ebenezer for his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always a pleasure being here. As I said a few months ago, upon request of Council Member Carmen de la Rosa, I add a session to the District Service Cabinet meeting agenda to discuss the subway entrance in the district and requesting report from DOT, MTA, Corner Project, et cetera, et cetera. At the District Service Cabinet meeting last week, it was reported by DOT that they have in a schedule to clean every 2 weeks the 191st Street tunnel, and they will clean. There's in a schedule to clean every other week. So that was a success there because DOT was saying that that was a street, considered a street, and therefore it was sanitation. And sanitation was doing in the past with the using the public, the people doing public service, and but they don't have it anymore, and therefore sanitation is not helping in the way it was helping before. So there was a win in this part that DOT have in a schedule for every other week, and the report said from other people that it was clean, looking clean the other day, the day before the District Service Cabinet meeting. And another thing that I need to report is that the week before, I had 2 visits to the ramp entrance to the Riverside Park, well, that we used to call, or I used to call, the path to the Little Red Lighthouse. I had a visit with Parks Department one day, the Parks Department and DOT one day, and Parks Department and New York and New Jersey Port Authority another day, because the 2 other agencies, Port Authority and DOT, they have conflict in the schedule. So we decided to have 2 separate meetings with the 2 separate agencies in order to have the meeting. We have a very good accomplishment here. Finally, DOT acknowledged that they are responsible for the ramp from the sidewalk on Haven and 187th Street, both ramps going over the bridge. That is DOT responsible. And the first day we went there, we saw DOT cleaning that entrance at that bridge as well. And then Parks Department is responsible from the bridge all the way down, the zigzag going to the Riverside Drive. That zigzag, it was observed that was in disrepair. We observed that the rail, some railing that is there are broken on the ground, and sharp edges that is a little, a hazard for pedestrian. Anyone can fall there, et cetera, and get hurt. Parks Department said that they don't have the resources to repair, and they're planning to remove those one. However, they only have 1 blacksmith in the entire border of Manhattan, and making it a little difficult to remove that. So I will be personally on top of that with Parks Department to make sure that they make that zigzag safe to pedestrian and anyone, bicyclists that go in there and that zigzag to the park. And also we observed a huge hole, a flag of the path sank, and it was hollow at the bottom. Parks Department make it safe by putting some cones and there to advise pedestrians and cyclists, but that path is in very disrepair. So I'm gonna continue working with Parks to make sure that they make this path safety to everyone there, but we have some advance there. With the meeting with the New York and New Jersey Port Authority, it was very successful because there are some lights that they have stickers that say that belongs to the New York, New Jersey Port Authority. And the representative said they're gonna investigate to make sure that if their lights are under their jurisdiction and make sure that they have the repairs, et cetera, et cetera. The zigzag and the path look clean. It wasn't that bad like a few years ago when I started advocating for this portion of in the district of the parks and entrance. And it was a win, a partially win, because now we need to advocate for the repair of the zigzag going there and make it safe, make sure that it's clean, and et cetera. It's a very difficult also as well because this area serve as a homeless encampment. And so we see, homeless, they live there and they go there. People go to that area to shoot drugs, et cetera, et cetera. We saw needles, et cetera, et cetera. But it's much better than a few years before. The 34 precinct report that the grand larceny is up in the precinct because of the car stealing. People are leaving the car with the keys inside and the key and running, and people take advantage of that situation and they steal the cars. For that reason, they are number one now, the grand larceny in that precinct. They report that and they advise that people, that double park to go very quickly to a store to grab food, etc., to not leave the car running with the kids inside. And finally, I have been working in the closing of the fiscal year 22, making all the payments to the vendors and also completing all the purchase that have been requested for the fiscal year 2022. So thank you very much. This is the end of my report. Is there any question? I see that Wayne has a question and followed by Isidro. Wayne?
Hi, Ebenezer, how are you?
Good, good.
Have you been able to confirm if you received the application from the Department of City Planning for that 206th Street development?
I will look into that. I saw your email and we had the back and forth that you initiated before. I spoke with the applicant, but and I saw some exchange with the agency. However, I need to look to see if we received that.
Yeah.
It is happening not only with this city agency, but another applicant. The other day, they sent me an email saying, "Oh, this is the second request that I sent you to have something on the agenda for licensing," and they sent it on Monday the 13th. And so when I did the research, so what is the first request? So you didn't send it. They just sent an email saying this is the second request, but I didn't see the date for the first request. And
that's why you see when the developer contacted me, I said, well, and I don't think you were copied. I said, did Department of City Planning formally send this to the community board office? And they got back to me and said, yes, City Planning said they sent it on the 10th. And I said, to whom did they send it? And they said, the district manager, Ebenezer Smith. That's why it's like, so you should see if the Department of City Planning sent you something, because once City Planning formally refers it, and this is what I pointed out to Eli a couple of times, I think we have a 45-day period. And even if it was sent on the 10th, 45 days takes us into July, which is like no good to begin with. But if they're saying they sent it, but you don't have it, the question is, where is it?
I will look to make sure that if I have it, and to be honest with you, the email that I have in my computer office, things get lost. If you send me an email, I reply that sometimes I need to ask Paola or Chanel, can you resend it to me because I can see it in the way it is organized. But you know that every time we receive something from any city agency, we immediately send it to you in case there is a land use because of the time frame that we have to respond, and also to all the other committee chairs. As soon as we see something, we send it. I will look and see what it is, and I get back to you as soon as I find something. Isidro?
I must give Ebenezer credit for getting this thing done with to get the winding road clean that leads to the lighthouse. I've been going to these meetings for the District Service Cabinet meeting for the last 6 years, and Ebenezer has been on top like practically every single month. And everyone was just washing their hands, pointing fingers, and to get this finally done so that this road will be clean and safe. Congratulations, Ebenezer. I know it has been a long road, but the road now it's now clean. So congratulations, and thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any other question? I don't see anyone, so thank you very much. God bless you all.
Okay, thank you, Ebenezer. I just realized, sorry, let me just double check all right, there's certain reports that aren't here, so I'll move them into new business later. I'm gonna move on to the future meeting items. So for our July and September meeting calendars. I'm going to obviously kick off with July. I know I saw the some other chairs trickle in. Is there anyone besides Liz planning a meeting in July?
I'm not planning a meeting in July. That's Wayne.
Sorry, yes. Well,
Yeah,
just
that's the other
People
Liz.
People confuse us all the time because we look so much alike.
It's the glasses. It's the glasses. And remember, technically, that is not
a meeting.
committee meeting. It's a training session.
Yes.
That we're hosting. And city planning is, you know, going to be our guide.
Okay, so I would encourage Paola Benizer, if instead of saying land use 7 p.m., if we can just put like whatever the title of the zoning training
Yeah,
session.
that's what I suggested, just a
Okay.
land use and zoning training session. So they put that in, but they still kept land use.
Yeah, because that's what we say. Okay, so it seems like nobody else is meeting this summer. Okay. I see that on the 26th, we have the committee of the whole at 6:30 and new board member orientation.
And by the way, that unless Governor Hochul extends her emergency, whatever it is again, that meeting will have to be in person under the new rules.
Okay, I think that I need clarity, and I might not be alone in this, if it's strictly a new board member orientation, or is it also a committee of the whole?
Well, what happened is there was a communication problem, which Paola can tell you about, with the new members and the training session we were going to have. And so hardly anyone signed up to attend. So it was decided to postpone it. Now, probably what we would do is have the new member orientation first, and then we would have the general board meeting or the committee of the whole. That was the plan. Again, you know.
Okay, but if we have the committee, sorry, I have a question. So 2 is, 1, do we need a committee of the whole? 2, if we have the committee of the whole, it has to be in person, but the new board member orientation can technically be virtual.
Right, except that the thing about the new, yes, it can, but part of the new member orientation, especially if, you know, the virus is behaving itself, is this has always been actually a welcoming ceremony, and, you know, people get to see one another. So, you know, we could, you know, do the training, but it wouldn't have that other aspect quite as well done.
No, I agree. I mean, we'll be in person. They'll be in person anyway for the first time. In terms of, like, you know what I mean? We're the only ones that have experienced the hybrid, the virtual. They're gonna come in fresh how we used to, in person. Liz has her hand up.
Yeah, I think that it is a mistake to try to do the new member orientation on the same day as the committee of the whole. There's a lot that goes into the new member orientation. And while there are, you know, we can decide at some other point whether it's in person or whether it's virtual, and there are advantages and disadvantages to both. But I do believe I would strongly advocate for having them be separate events, because they're very, very different things. And there's just a lot of information that I feel is helpful to share with new members. And I think that they're going to get short shrift if we try and cram all that into an hour before a committee of the whole. I just think it's like a really terrible idea, really terrible.
I agree with Liz.
And to be
I agree
clear,
with Liz.
thank you. And to be clear, my understanding of the new member orientation is that it's going to be, since we didn't really have a new member orientation last year, it would be a new member orientation for people who, I guess, were appointed in like 2021 and in 2022, question mark? I don't know.
So
I
I'm
think
gonna
we
have Debbie.
a new member orientation in, I believe in the Alianza Triangle building. Wasn't that a new member? I believe he's like all of us spoke.
Yeah, it was, but now we have a bigger class. Some people couldn't make it.
Oh,
Debbie came in and didn't speak. I'm gonna have Debbie talk, and then say my piece so we can keep going. Go ahead, Debbie. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I guess I'm trying, well, one, you know, like what happened? Like, so there was one scheduled. I have to say, I didn't really know the date. I knew that there was a date around. And then luckily at the last minute, it ended up being bumped. But like, what does that mean we didn't have the right email address? Like, and I just want to remind whoever this goes to that something being on a date on those paper calendars is not actually like calendaring it with us. Like, that's not the way I personally would take information. I think most of us don't. I don't, that's not a communication. And sort of, did we really only do our whatever did happen 2 days in advance of the event? Like, this is a big deal. And I feel like it's kind of been getting lost in the shuffle the past couple of years. And I know some of that's in the pandemic, but like, I think, I don't mean to like pick at a scab here, but I think it would be helpful to understand like what happened and how can we do it better? And not for nothing, isn't this rescheduled for like the 27th or the 28th already? So it wouldn't be committee of the whole time anyway, or no?
Debbie, first I can't even answer your question around what happened because I was out the country and I had an hour to prep for this. So I wish I could answer that. I would say email Ellie on what happened with the first turnaround. But you are right in saying that the date was already put forth and I think sent maybe to all the board members. So that means that would be another rescheduling. So what I would suggest to do is keep the 26th, if that was the date that we put out, as a new board member orientation and move the committee of the whole to the 19th, which is the third. I know August is usually a terrible month, so I'm not even going to suggest August, but to the 19th.
We could also ditch the committee of the whole. It's not required.
Yeah, that was also my initial question as to like, usually my understanding is that the committee of the whole is for like pertinent big things that usually come our way to vote on or an important thing. And so because we're going to be in person in September, I can understand. But that's also stuff that we can kind of email about. That isn't necessarily subject to open meeting law in terms of, you know, the house. I'm not sure, are there strong feelings either way, whether we ditch or maintain the committee of the whole?
Ditch it.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah, Jim.
What I think we could do is put it in the calendar as tentative meeting of the whole if necessary. And then there may, for example, hypothetically, you know, which is one of Wayne's themes, and I agree with him, you know, suddenly someone decides to build something right on top of PS 132, and we don't want that. And we have to have a meeting about it. So if we have this tentative meeting, and then we can let people know that, you know, they're you know, that we've chosen not to have it, or that there's no need for it.
Valid. I'm comfortable with that. So Ebenezer, we'll leave the 26th of the new board member orientation. I threw out the 19th for committee of the whole just in case. And then of course I know, and there, if there's any updates around, especially since the 14th is when the open meeting, not the open meeting law, but when the executive order expires, maybe we'll learn anything new.
And by the way, Art, the new member orientation is the 27th.
Okay, so that's a typo anyway on the July calendar. So it has to be the 27th instead of the 26th.
Well, I'm personally not convinced that having a new member orientation in the summer is going to work out, whether the people will be able to come. So what we might want to do, again, with this tentative, let me just finish, is poll all of the new members that we plan to, and then saying that we have this tentative date, would they be available on that date? And if a majority of them can't come, then we'll have to find a better date. Because, you know, people go away for the summer if they're lucky and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that also doesn't have to be on the actual public meeting calendar because it's a new member orientation.
Exactly.
So
You can even say it's not
let's,
a meeting.
Paula, if you're still here, if not for recording purposes, let's make sure we can even get enough people present to pull it off. Let's move on to September, folks. I'm gonna share it on the screen. It looks jam-packed. So right off the start, pre-Labor Day, we have two committees that will be meeting in person. And so health and housing will be kicking us off. Obviously, room designations are going to have to be, I think, specified. That doesn't have to happen now, but if you do think, I mean, just my opinion, I do think that like if you feel like you're gonna have a meeting, September agenda, and would like the bigger room, that's something to talk. Go ahead, Liz. And
Yeah, Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
Doesn't end until Tuesday evening, the 27th, and it doesn't end until 72 minutes after sundown. So I believe it would be inappropriate to have our general meeting on Rosh Hashanah, and I respectfully request that we move it to the 28th or the 29th. Doesn't really matter which one. We could, in theory, move it to the 20th, but I feel like that's a really heavy lift on the staff. So I would suggest that we move it to the 28th. I think Wednesday's probably a better day than Thursdays, because I know Thursdays are a lot of community events because people who work in Albany are usually back in the district for Thursday events. So I would suggest the 28th.
Okay, I got that. Isidro?
Just quickly for licensing, we meet at 6:30, not 7:30. So please make that correction.
Oh.
Okay, licensing 6:30.
Oh yeah, thanks. Parks meets at 6:30, not 7. I think there are a bunch of meetings that meet at 6:30, not 7.
Yeah, housing. I mean, remember that we're going back to in person too. So chairs decide on that.
I'm gonna keep mine for 6:30, and I'm gonna recognize that we may wind up not calling it to order until a little bit later.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna keep with 6:30.
And I
Excellent.
think Steve wanted to move his back to 7 o'clock once we were in person.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Isidro, you got another hand? And then Liz. Liz, are you frozen? Yeah, you're frozen. Oh no.
No, I'm not frozen. I was staring at two screens because I'm still working on this reso. I just want to, as a heads up, want to remind people that although we're not talking about the October calendar now, I would like for Ebenezer to be mindful when he makes the October draft calendar to, rather than to not put any of the meetings like on Yom Kippur, on Sukkot, like leave them off the calendar and have the calendar at the bottom say, these meetings which conflict with very important Jewish holidays may need to be rescheduled. And I think that's gonna force us to like make sure that we don't do that thing that we sometimes do, which is, calendar meetings on the holiest days of the Jewish year, and then all be surprised that we need to make a change.
Okay.
It is a known thing that these holidays exist, and I would like to, I would appreciate it if the staff would not calendar those meetings and just flag at the bottom, these meetings need to be calendared.
Okay, I know Ebenezer has his hand up. For now, I haven't heard anyone opposed to the 28th versus the 20th. I'm guessing we can keep the 28th for the September calendar. Ebenezer?
Yes,
Didn't we say the 27th?
No, the 27th is still Rosh Hashanah, which is why they're both in red. So, which is Tuesday. So it would be either Wednesday, the
I'm
28th,
sorry.
or Tuesday. It's okay.
In my printer. Oh.
Yes, I
Ebenezer.
just want to bring to the attention to the health committee and the housing committee It falls on September 1st. The Thursday before Labor Day is a long weekend. Aging Committee already decided to move its committee meeting from the 1st to the 8th, but I didn't move the other two committees until I don't get the okay from the committee chairs from those committees. So it's a question. We're going to have meeting there. We don't mind. The office doesn't mind to have the meeting those days, but we understand that it's a long weekend and people planning to get out of the city and enjoy the last days of the summer.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, if we move all three, then we need the second floor. So I mean, Steve isn't here. Emily is on standby, Yano housing. So I think we can connect offline up and decide that.
Okay, I will call these two committee chairs tomorrow, and if they say it's okay, so we're going to move it.
All right. So, all right. So cool. So general board meeting the 28th, because I agree 20th is crazy. Okay. So that covers our calendars. Unless there's anything. No, cool. All right. So let's dive in. It's 7:48 to committee reports. I was Domingo. Yes, it's your turn.
Could I go first because I have to step out a little bit?
Yeah, you're actually first anyway. Go.
All right. So we basically discussed the precincts gave their reports. Quorum has been difficult. Hopefully, in person gets us back together and put the committee work in a much more smoother pace. But besides that, there hasn't been much of an increase in anything at this particular moment. There was some who took a stroll through the Edgecombe facility. I believe it was June 4th. Jumi was leading that effort, trying to get individuals from the board to go, Jumi and Barbara. And besides that, I think that there's some concerns with what's going on in Edgecombe facility. They've been reconfigured now to become a sort of shelter for newly released individuals from state penitentiaries as a transitional home for up to 90 days. This was just randomly came up in a conversation, and as I told the superintendent, why wasn't there a public forum where we discussed any transitions happening at Edgecombe? They said that the elected officials had voted on it. So that's something that I'll be probing more, making sure we get as much information and stay on top of it. But I do think it's pretty disrespectful when somebody when any city or state agency goes about modifying anything without engaging the community, which is going to be often the most impacted by any changes, regardless of how minimal they may seem.
Are there any questions for Domingo? Okay. Yeah, thank you, Domingo. And you know, if Jumi has like a written report or something like that, that'd be cool to hear in next week.
Actually, before we lose Domingo, I just want to raise, and it's probably something for the fall, but increasingly TNT meetings are turning into people raising issues that relate to traffic enforcement. So I just want to put that out there. I mean, when we talk about what are the most common things we hear from our community again and again and again, I cannot tell you how many of those things, you know, are coming in my way. I mean, people in other community boards, they sometimes combine the two, like what we consider TNT and public safety, because long ago, you know, a while back, traffic enforcement sat with DOT. but people are really frustrated, and I don't love having it come up in my committee because I don't have any, like I can't do it. So I
Yeah.
just want to say that I think that it might be an opportunity come the fall to, or
Yeah.
at some point
I
to schedule
completely
something
agree,
to get.
Debbie. We had a public safety forum where a lot of the conversations that came up where people assumed that they would go to traffic and transportation, because a lot of it has to do with modifying traffic patterns and being able to install certain things to be able to deter certain activities. So there is some intersectionalities on both committees, but however I could help. I know a lot of it has to do with enforcement, but every time the officers raise it, it's like, oh no, this city agency has to do this and at this bar. So it's always, everybody's constantly reflecting off responsibility to somebody else. And like, if we get on the same page, I'm assuming we could really like hold them accountable as like, okay, cool. This can't be like a back and forth. It is like, we're looking for solutions, not for who's responsible, So I do hear you.
The streets, there's a limit to what streets can do. And
Exactly.
we don't change streets just
And-
because there's like a proportion.
And even
exactly,
and even in enforcement, right? Because they're like, oh, we want a speed bump. That was a lot of what individuals are racing. So I'm assuming that goes to traffic and transportation. But then they're like, oh yeah, but there's no officers. But then the officers say, well, we're working with to create this barricade here. So it's a back and forth on like deflecting responsibilities.
Okay. I'm gonna have actually Jim go first and then Liz, because then you can dive into your report, Liz.
I just wanted to mention that many, many years ago, as Debbie mentioned, here at Community Board, we had a combined committee called Traffic, Transportation, and Public Safety. But I think, as I'm hearing now, and it's very, music to my ears, it sounds like that, the two committees are going to coordinate very nicely, and hopefully we can get some of this craziness under control.
Liz?
Jim took the words right out of my mouth. So that's what I was going to say. So I can just give my brief report. We don't have any resolutions, but we did have a very full meeting with some really good presentations, including a visit from Deputy Commissioner for Cultural Affairs. It was really nice to have her drop in. That's one of the great things about Zoom. We can have guests, like really senior agency officials who can just come in for 15, 20 minutes and talk about, in this case, her vision for the commissioner's vision for cultural affairs, for the city generally, the borough, this community, and ways that different cultural organizations can participate, can benefit from the city funding for cultural affairs. So that was really great. We also had a great presentation, two presentations from EDC, one about co-presented by EDC and Mino Laura from the People's Theater Project regarding the IRPAC, the Immigrant Performing Arts Research. It's such an alphabet soup. I actually forget what it stands for. But one of the takeaways is that's not what this thing is going to be called. And one of the community imperatives is to find a better name, because IRPAC doesn't exactly roll off the tongue. You know what I'm saying? Fernando Ortiz from EDC also gave a great presentation on the Greenway, the proposed updates to the infrastructure improvements to the Greenway on the east side. And just in terms of, speaking of greenways, the public issue that we've been hearing regarding the reconstruction or the renovation of the path, the Greenway path on the Hudson side, and ways in which traffic is going to be redirected, bicycle traffic is going to be sort of redirected into Broadway in a way that's kind of dangerous. The Parks Department has reached out to the Department of Transportation, the state DOT, to see if there are possibly some other mitigations that can be done during construction. And the borough president's office was very helpful in stepping in and highlighting quite directly to the commissioners of Parks and Transportation the resolution that this board made back last year about how important it was to make sure that bicycle traffic was properly cared for during this project. So it took the agencies a little while, but with the intervention of the borough president's office, we are getting some involvement from them, and lots of other interesting things happening in my committee. For that, read the minutes, which should be available in time for the meeting next week.
Questions? No? All right. Well, Mary, you're already unmuted, so go ahead.
Okay. It's trying to find something else on my computer and I unmuted myself by mistake, but guess it wasn't a mistake. Anyway, I would like to start off my report by asking for a moment of silence for somebody who was a public member on my committee, on the aging committee, I should say. And actually, she was a member of the community board. She was a full member of the aging committee for many, many, many years. And those of you who've been on the board for a long time know who she is, Norma DiCandido. She passed away on May 29th in the hospital, basically of natural causes. She's been in a nursing home for a while now, initially in rehab and then over into the nursing home because she wasn't doing well physically. Mentally, she was top notch. She was still watching CNN and could tell you what was going on in the world better than any of us could. So if I could just ask for a moment of silence for her memory. Thank you. The other thing I want to say is that we will be actually losing one of our public members. Fern Hertzberg is actually retiring at the end of the month. And since she will no longer be working in the city or live and doesn't live in the city, we actually have a new public member on our committee, Dory Garcia, who is going to be the executive director of ARC 16. So we welcome her to our committee, and we're sorry to lose Fern. Fern has been around on our committee and other committees for a long time. The other thing I wanted to say about Norma, even though she was a public member, she attended every single general meeting on the board throughout her tenure. So, you know, an exemplary person. So our meeting on June 2nd, we had a presentation, a great presentation on cultural competency, well, cultural sensitivity really, and education, presented by some folks from MJHS, Diane Ashley, who was the Chief Marketing Communication Officer, Toby Weiss, who's the AVP of Cultural Diversity, and Ashton Stewart, who's Veteran Liaison and Cultural Sensitivity Outreach Coordinator. Both of those folks in MJH Hospice and Palliative Care. So it was, you know, just a wonderful, wonderful presentation, and a lot of educational stuff, and you know, reminding us about how to be sensitive and open and ask open-ended questions of people in hospice and palliative care, and also in other venues to really see where they're coming from. And there was a focus on the LGBTQ elderly community, since it was Pride Month. And so, had some discussion about what was going on with that. Ashton Stewart presented how the Restoration of Honor Act, so that people were, the veterans who were discharged under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell the veterans benefits they earn serving the country, getting their benefits back during that period of time. I want to, we also, because of the extensive, excellent presentation and work that Isabella does, that MJHS does, with this cultural sensitivity program that they have in place and have training about it and all of this, wanted to do a reso to actually thank MJHS for the work that they've done in this respect. And Richard Allman actually spearheaded that, and I'd like him to come on board to speak about this reso.
I'm sorry, it's for who to come on board?
Richard Allman.
Sorry, I missed that. He was here.
He was having some difficulty, but I don't know if he's.
I mean, was it shared yet? No, the reso?
General meeting, when we actually vote on it?
Yeah, we can have Richard talk about it if presented at the general. That shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, all right, because we need to do a little bit more work on it. It's a reso that was discussed, and we agreed, unanimously to do this reso, recognizing MJHS for their work, basically.
Okay.
In this respect. So that's what the reso is about.
I mean, I think everyone here is pretty open, and we have some great folks on these. If you want to circulate it to any one or two members for feedback before it gets presented for a full vote. I want to say Sally has her hand up for you if you're ready to take a question.
Okay.
Mary, more a comment than a question. I don't know if you've noticed, but Coach Dave Crenshaw has been doing a lot of technology stuff for seniors at all of his events. He has tables, so I just wanted to make you aware of it if you weren't already, but you are. So never mind.
I was one of the people at his table at the Hike the Heights
cool.
event.
Cool. Thank you.
Zoomed
so much.
right there first.
Yay.
All right. Anything else, Mary?
No. Our next meeting, as Ebenezer said, will be September 8th. We decided to wait until after Labor Day. And I guess I'm thankful, because otherwise it'd be the first one that would have to have a meeting if this new open law thing,
I hear you. It's
rather
gonna
somebody
take
else
some
goes
adjustment.
first.
It's gonna take some trial and error. All right, I'm gonna pass it on to Wayne for land use.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. So land use, couple things. So as we discussed earlier this evening, we confirmed that for July, we will host a land use and zoning training session. And that training session is intended for all board members as well as for residents of Washington Heights and Inwood. There was a notice drafted and got comments from the committee and forwarded to the office staff. So the intention is for that notice to be, of course, translated to Spanish, but then for it to be e-blasted early and often, well in advance of July 7th, so that there's ample notice of that. Coordinated with Eleazar, and he said that we'll be able to do simultaneous Spanish translation through a Zoom room. So that's good. So that's something where It gives us an opportunity to get a better understanding of, some of the, basics of, land use and zoning. We're often talking about, waivers or special permits, and it helps us to understand sort of the foundation of what these things mean and how in fact they can be modified. We had 3 presentations, 2 of which generated resolutions. And the 2 that generated the resolutions pertain to historic houses that are in our district. The Dykeman Farmhouse has a $6.9 million capital improvement project that is pending. It's going to make the entire site accessible. There'll be an accessible path from the entrance to the park throughout the site, as well as the first floor of the farmhouse will now be accessible, and the entrance will shift. The public entrance will shift from the Broadway East entrance to the west entrance, which is more in a park-like setting, and that west porch will be adjusted so that, that whole entranceway is accessible. I think they have to raise it by 3 inches to make the porch meet the elevation of the door. There was historically an addition to the farmhouse that was built in, I think, the early 19th century and was demolished 70 odd years later in the early 20th century. So there's a proposal to rebuild an addition more or less in that same location, and that would allow the office space and the caretaker's residence, as well as, a real public toilet, to be moved out of sort of historic space into a new accessible space, and allow some of those other spaces to be put to use. The Morris Jamel Mansion has, I think, a $2.8 million capital improvement. There again, the main floor will be made accessible, and the exterior building envelope will be restored, and things like the leaking roof repaired, and windows will either be repaired or replaced. The approvals for both Dykeman and Morris Jamel have to go to the Landmarks Commission because they're both designated buildings. Dykeman, I think the entire project is going to the commissioners. With Morris Jamel, it's a split approval. There are certain things that Landmark staff can approve at the staff level if you're not really making a change to the historic building. However, things like there's a ramp that's being built to make the entrance accessible at Morris Jamel. That's clearly a change to the historic building, so the commissioners need to opine on that. Also, there are a number of deteriorated or missing, rails at balconies in the roof. The original material used to build it obviously was wood. The proposed material is a wood composite. So it will look, the design will not be any different, but since it will not be the original material, the commissioners have to opine on the composite material for the railings, and they have to opine on the addition of the ramp. Repairing broken columns and repainting the facade and repairing windows can be done at a staff level. So at the July LPC meeting, the Dykeman and the Morris Jamel projects will be presented. The committee, approved, passed resolution supporting each of those. And I would also point out these buildings are in parks, and the projects were actually presented to Parks and Cultural Affairs in September of last year. And the designs were not probably final at that time, and they were certainly not ready to go to LPC. Liz could not make it to the June meeting, and we decided instead of making Parks and the Historic House Trust go to 2 meetings in June, they came to land use, but Nobles Crawford was there and Sally Fisher was there. They are both on Parks and Cultural Affairs Committee. And also I forwarded to Liz and Nobles and Sarah the draft resolutions that came out of land use for their review and comment, as well as the PDF presentations. So we have some input from Parks as well. The third presentation had to do with the project that I mentioned to Ebenezer. It's a new development at 406. It's 405, 407 West 206th Street. It's basically the site of the old Pathmark. It's almost the entire block, and it's close to 900 units of housing, plus the People's Theater project that Liz mentioned, as well as another application for a fresh supermarket. And there's, fortunately, there's also underground parking. The problem with this is, it's not like the 4650 Broadway, because it's not a building that's adjacent to a designated park that has a designated building in it. It's an issue of timing. And Ebenezer sent me an email confirming that city planning did forward the application on June 10th. So that is, after the land use committee meeting met on June 1st, although we did discuss it, we did not have a formal application. I got confirmation today, which is the day of the executive committee, that it was received. So we have, I think, 45 days either from the date it was forwarded, or there may be a grace period, but in either event, that takes us into July. We don't have July meetings. I don't find the supermarket to be that big an issue. However, this was never presented to Housing and Human Services. And just in land use, we had tons of questions about affordability, about the unit mix. And we think it's really, appropriate for there to be a discussion, with Housing and Human Services, about this, project. The other thing that is troubling is with the 421A tax benefits, the way the program was changed years ago, 421A applications no longer have to receive any kind of comment from the community board. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but once again, this project includes 421A, although technically, the 421A program expired on the 15th of this month. And when we discussed the project with them, if you started your foundations or you did some, work on foundations, you could grandfather in. And we said, today's June 1st. You haven't started anything. What work can you realistically do by the 15th of June in order to grandfather in the program? So we don't even know where that is. The other issue is, this is next to the 207th Street Bridge. There's a tremendous amount of traffic. And although there's no discretionary action that's required vis-a-vis traffic, we said, we thought it would be a great idea if they had a conversation with the Traffic and Transportation Committee to talk through some of those issues, and that perhaps collectively, the development team, which often has more access to City Hall than the Community Board, and the TNT Committee could come up with some recommendations on some traffic mitigation issues, because right now it's, for the most part, a vacant site with some 1 or 2 story buildings along, the avenue. Now you're talking about 900 units of housing, and once again, an active supermarket and a theater. You're bringing more traffic. So you're bringing more traffic to an area that's already congested. What are some of the things that, DOT can do to help address that? I don't know if any of those conversations have taken place yet. So there are a lot of concerns with, this. I suggested to Ebenezer and Eliezer that once we confirmed that the application was received on the 10th, which it was, that we reach out to city planning to see if they could do something to extend, the deadline, because, frankly, city planning knows as well as anyone else that community boards are in recess for the summer.
Super comprehensive, Wayne. Wow, yeah, I had a lot going on this month. Any hand, I see a hand, Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to thank Wayne for conducting the Morris Jamel and Dykeman farmhouse discussions in the way that he did. There are so many times when we have, the same issue that affects more than one committee. And it's really important to have multiple committee participation, but I really don't like dragging people out for an extra meeting if we can avoid it. So I think this process really worked, and I appreciate that.
Very welcome.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and I think for sure next week, and sending out as much as we can the flyer for the land use training. We can stress that vital.
Okay.
Okay, cool. So thank you, Wayne. Next up we have housing. Emily, Emily, you are here. Welcome. I want to just quickly shout out Emily, who like dove into chairing the housing meeting while still figuring out, what everything in terms of being a board member and let alone running a committee.
And
so
she did all of that while being chased by a baby seal.
That's right.
Yeah, so Emily, as you can probably hear, this is really, your couple minutes to share about, either how it went. Normally, these reports are like things that might be in the pipeline, but obviously we're in June. We don't know what's going on. So, if you want to share anything about how your meeting went or how it went to chairing a meeting in the first place.
Sure. Thanks, Catherine. And I also want to thank you for being there during that meeting for me, because that really helped out a lot. I had so many questions already. So good evening, everyone. Sorry for arriving late. I was in the streets and my phone died and it was raining. So, so I'm finally home. So I did miss quite a bit, but I'll catch up. So we sent in the amended rent guidelines board resolution after a few suggestions were given in the last general meeting. And I believe, according to Ebenezer, you sent it in before the amendment, but I hope that like it was already resent and everything. I have so many emails that I haven't really, I think you said you did, but yes. And during our last meeting, yes, June 2nd, we didn't meet quorum. So we were short of one person to meet quorum. And we just ended up discussing the one agenda item, which was getting input on the public safety resolution for the two subway locations, 160 and 191st. We did discuss it a little bit, and then I did do the minutes, send it to the other members, and I haven't gotten any more feedback, but we did discuss some things about the resolution. I don't know if I should mention it here or just send it straight to y'all. Yeah, yes or no?
It's up to you. I think for the sake of time, if you want, you can just send it since it's not being voted on tonight. And I'm assuming would be voted on at the general meeting, is that it?
Yeah, I think
No, we would need
Oh.
to vote on it in the executive committee so that we can then put it onto the floor at the general.
Okay,
That's typically how we do that.
yeah.
Okay, well, we received some feedback on it. I mean, I was just trying to get a feel for why we got it to begin with. And some people did make suggestions about like maybe adding more details on statistics and mentioning, they mentioned that it seems like it's two different entities or issues, that perhaps it would be a good idea to like flesh out the issues at each station so that we could better address each of those issues, or even potentially doing two separate resolutions if it's a lot. But that's more or less what the feedback that I received from the members that did attend. And we were about to close, but then a few people from the public did bring up the Armory Foundation and like why there wasn't a meeting being held, why there wasn't a date for June yet, and if we had gotten any word back from anyone. So I just know that from what I was updated that we didn't get any feedback from anyone or any responses about officials that could have like a June date. So that's what I told them. And see if there's anything else.
Liz has her hand up for you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this is a resolution that's going to go to the full board for us to vote on, and which would need to be voted out of this committee since you didn't have a quorum. Would it be possible for you to share screen with whatever draft it was that you were going to vote out of your committee?
For the Armory Foundation?
Whatever resolution it was that you were going to vote on.
Right.
But
No, the
didn't-
other one that was, yeah, the one, I think it was the rent board guideline. No, not the rent guideline one. The public safety one, was it?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm on my phone. Let me see if maybe I could pull it up.
Okay, so
To me. Mhm.
while you pull it up, I'm gonna just, because of time, move on to licensing, and then if you got it, we'll come back to you. But if you feel like it's in shape based on the feedback that you have, we have to vote on it tonight, or it has to be pushed to September because you didn't have a quorum.
It doesn't have to be pushed to September.
It doesn't?
It could be introduced as new business. Jim, help me out here, what the
Okay.
proper thing is. Or we could, ideally agree in principle on it this evening.
Okay. You see that? You want to go in the meantime?
Let me just comment in response to Liz. The other thing I sort of heard is maybe the committee is not quite comfortable with this resolution yet, because I heard about all these additional things. So the committee may not even want to bring it to the full board, in its current state. That's something we should consider.
That's valid. I see Debbie got a hand. You're on mute, Debbie.
I'm doing that a lot tonight. Is this a resolution that had come up briefly before and Barbara had presented it and then we said to just bake it a little bit more? Is that one? Or am I conflating it with something else?
I think I got it.
Wait, hold on. Sorry, Emily, is it the one that you presented that night? The one from public safety?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so that one wouldn't be for you to present to vote.
Yeah, I can't do that. I was like, that's not mine.
Sorry. Even I got twisted.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was, yeah, it was a it was a discussion around the feedback. So yes, this wouldn't be anything to present to vote.
Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Emily. I don't see any other hands for you. So we'll go on to Isidro next up.
Thank you, Catherine. So we did have a lot of applicants. We had 26 applications, and 2 of them were withdrawn at the meeting or prior to. 2 of the applicants did not pass, and I would bring details as well as that is concerned. No major issues. But there is one thing that I have to bring it up to this committee to see if perhaps you can vote. There was an applicant for the Taxi and Limousine Commission that submitted the paperwork in time. The staff of the office could not see the emails. So I recommended that we write a resolution and be voted here on the committee. Practically for the Taxi and Limousine Commission, it's very straightforward. They only need to have the approval of the board. It's not like a liquor license. And basically, it's very limited. So I wrote a resolution and sent it out to Ebenezer. But if you would like, I can read it out to you. It's nothing major that the board, the committee approves its license, that the executive committee has met on the 21st to consider this request, and that the committee approved it for the renewal of this Tax and Limousine Commission.
Isidro,
Every year.
sorry, are you able to share it on the screen? Because we don't have it.
I guess I can if I'm given the
Yeah.
option.
You're a panelist, you can share.
Mm-hmm.
Could you remind us why your committee didn't vote on this?
Again, the staff members did not receive this.
Oh, right, the paperwork got lost or whatever.
Right.
Okay, but other than that, this is there were, they should be getting their renewal.
Right.
What's the name?
Okay, thank you.
It's the first class car limo.
Oh,
It's 4990 Broadway.
and this is just gonna be your usual, then I would second that motion.
Thank you, Liz. If there are no oppositions, committee members, then this will be sent out to the general board and they will vote as a final vote.
Okay. Hold on, are there any, since the second, are there any oppositions? Abstentions? Conflicts? All right, unanimous.
Uh,
I'm remembering, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And that's basically my report. I have written all the resolutions, so I'll be able to send this the 26 resolutions to the board later on tonight. It's a lot of work, but I got it done because I started earlier. So I'm happy to report that we'll have all the result by tomorrow, the latest, for those staff members to start working on it, because I know it's a lot of work. And that's my report, Chair.
Excellent, thank you, Isidro, that is monumental. All right, next up, we have, we're almost done. Steve's not here. Faye, are you still around? Yep, Faye's here.
Yes, thank you, Catherine. Thank you. And good evening, everyone. Yes, okay. I would like to report that our Youth and Education Committee, we had 2 presentations. The first presentation that we had was provided by the Mayor Office of Immigrant Affairs and Community Services. The presenter was Kevin Maldonado, who is the Intergovernmental Affairs Associate. And he actually presented a series of services available for the community. And he wanted to make aware the community or make those resources, make the community aware, yes, of those resources. Among the things that he discusses, he discussed the ID program that, the mayor is planning and continuing on providing community-based organization willing to promote that, or they're willing also to come and present, to make any presentation. He also discussed the immigration services, free attorney services that his office is willing to provide also to folks who are in needs of any free attorney, I guess, consultation, and also, for those who need information on how to file petition or become U.S. citizen. So they doing all that. He also spoke about the ESL or English classes available also for community-based organization who wanted to pursue the program or work with them, along with them. And basically, he just wanted to make our community aware of those programs and those resources. And also he encouraged the committee and everyone participating in the meeting to share this information with community-based organizations. And he also, share he contacts information and willing to come back, to the board. The second presentation that we had it from Al Santino, who is the community coordinator at Viva Uptown. And he basically encouraged the committee to share the words about his program, who is looking to promote youth and police, healthy relationship, basically similar to the initiative that, our committee, started in 2015. So, and basically that's it. That was, that is my report. And all I wanted to say before, since this is our concluding meeting before we go in recess, I just wanted to wish everyone a healthy and great summer. And I look forward to seeing all of you and your best in September. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Faye. All right, next up we have, I saw no hands, Debbie.
I just wanted to let you know that I sent the draft reso to Ebenezer, the office. Jim took a look at it, so it's ready to go out tomorrow.
Awesome, thank you. Who did I say? Oh yeah, Debbie, it's your turn.
So the main thing on the agenda the other night was accessibility project by the MTA at the 181st Street A station. We're obviously, everyone is always looking for more accessibility uptown, and long-term, the goal of the MTA is to have people not being more than like 2 stops away from where they need to be without accessibility. So this is an important piece of trying to achieve that. The only sort of complicating thing is that the escalators are being replaced at the south end of the station. And so there's a lot of coordination on timelines to make sure that everybody can keep moving and getting where they need to go. Because for the escalator replacement, there's both the escalator replacement and then the stairs on the south end, all like 800 of them. The stairway itself is going to get some upgrades to make it what's considered ADA accessible for stairways, which has to do with like the railings and such like that. Anyway, there'll be a lot of staging areas for the construction, so lots of more lost parking, just like we've seen when there have been elevator replacement projects. It's no different for the replacement elevators, and then also again for the escalator project as well. But all important work, as much as it will be somewhat disruptive. And the second thing that we spend time on, Liz has already touched upon, which is the issue of the problem with the closure of the Greenway and the alternative that was suggested by Parks and sort of approved by DOT, which was, sorry, I'm appearing very dark, but that people take their bicycles onto Broadway, which no cyclist was willing to do. And so as Liz gave the summary, I would also add that I think Carmen de la Rosa, our council member, has also gotten involved, which I think is sort of the appropriate thing. I think the community bar took the ball as far as it could in one way, and it really did need the escalation and visibility from Manhattan Borough President and from our council member to kind of hold people to thinking bigger. I mean, there's no good answer here really with our existing streets, but we also, it just wasn't, we were just telling people just like they would have no alternative for the duration of the construction really. So that was it. That was most of it.
Thanks, Debbie. Isidro has his hand for you.
So Debbie, as far as the escalator, and you say going to be upgraded, are they going to be a lot wider? That would be my first question. And secondly, as far as like the elevators, where they're going to come out on the street and where they're going to land on the platform?
So both are excellent questions. So I'm going to take the second first. So if people remember, you can already get from the street to the upper mezzanine, you know, where the turnstiles are. So that's already got an elevator. The elevators, the 2 elevators to take you from the mezzanine where the turnstiles are to the actual platform are the new ones. And those are going to be on the other side of the turnstile. So you have a little bit, you know, you come off the escalators like from 184th or from coming off Overlook. And then you go to the escalators to take you to whichever platform you're going to. I should say that there's a possibility that there will be a few months at a point where the Overlook door, like you won't be able to come in from Overlook, and that's going to be a problem, but they're working on that not being the case, but it's, the engineers don't have that sorted yet. As for the escalators, what they're going to do is, I mean, as you know, there's 3 escalators. So the one on either side will be wider to be more be ADA compliant. So you'll have the one up, one down that are wider. I think it was 32 feet. And then the middle one will remain, I mean, it'll be brand new, but it will be more like what we have now, which is, I think is 24. And they have a slightly different pitch. And yeah, so the whole thing's getting ripped out because like everything's a different dimension and everything will be brand new machine room, the whole
Yeah.
the whole thing.
So I noticed that the escalator in the middle has served as a service escalator, which means if that would be the intended used, then would not be complying with ADA codes, because as it is now, the one in the middle doesn't comply. So if they leave it the same width and still be used as a service escalator, then we'll still have the same problem, I think.
Well, I mean, I don't, this is where I need Edith. I don't know chapter and verse on ADA accessibility, but I imagine if you have two of the escalator, you have one escalator up and one escalator down and they're both ADA width, then that's considered that you've achieved it. And the fact that the swing one, which usually heads up, but sometimes heads down, is not the wide width. Is what I mean. They only have the room they have, so it is what it is.
Wayne has his hand for you, and then we'll move on.
Just quickly, I'm not certain, I'd have to check. I don't know if escalators are in fact a means of achieving accessibility for ADA. So is it really an ADA project, or is it New York City code compliance? Different.
Well, they refer to it, it's a good question. They refer to all of it as ADA. So, and then at every meeting that I've seen this present, because I've seen the presentation twice now in two different settings, it's like people are like, what does that mean, an ADA compliant stairwell?
Well, exactly, because stairs are not ADA, but in terms of the width and where the handrail has to be placed, that's code compliance, building code.
Okay, I take your word for it. I'm just saying those are the words they use.
Yeah, but that's what I was asking, because I'm just not certain if escalators are ever used as a means to achieve ADA compliance, but there are building code requirements for the width, the pitch, the speed, and all that other good stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe you can just have them clarify if it's really ADA or some of it ADA and some of it's building code compliance.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. We'll keep monitoring that. I know it's been kind of hot. And actually, I would I think for a lot of projects, usually I really appreciate the signage and the announcements when it comes to the elevator project. I think they really specify to people, especially the number of stairs that people would have to take versus standard staircases.
And just so people know, because there are a lot of people, a lot of us were we're happy to see it start, don't get me wrong, but like it was just kind of seemed like they just shut the escalators down. And even like my main contact at MTA didn't get a heads up. And they said part of the reason that happened was one of the escalators was out for being serviced for the past months. And then they just realized they could not fix it. Like they could no longer get the parts. It was not going to come back in service. And then they were like, we just got to get going, because we couldn't, you were already down. So.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So on the agenda are task force updates. But what's his name? Oh my God. IT's not here. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name. And for LGBTQ, we have Richard, but
Meta Nunez.
I'm sorry?
Jonathan from Meta Nunez.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. I'm not sure if LGBTQ is still directed towards Richard. He gave an update before on what the status of that was. So he hasn't been able to unmute. So I'm going to take that as there's nothing to update.
Somebody's got some background noise. Can you-
That's me, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. It's that time. Is there any old business that folks may have? Okay, any new business? All right, well, this was a little longer than anticipated, but I think we got some really great discussions and we're gonna have a very eventful meeting and lots of stuff for the office to send out tomorrow in the next couple days. So, you know, anything again related to resolution, anything again related to how to improve. I mean, we got 20 something license applications. We have a few resos and a public session in June. So any tips you have and ask, I appreciate that. I guess I'm gonna put a motion for adjournment.
To adjourn?
Motion.
All right, seconded by Cedro. Thank you.
Good job, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Good night, all.
Good night. Good night. Thank you.